we are starting to get details on the extent of the NSA wiretapping, data mining. There are a couple of different areas of coordination between the government and private industry that we're going to talk about, and details are still coming out, but we have some more information than we had in previous days. So first, you have the major phone networks that are working with the NSA. That includes Verizon, AT&T, Sprint, no word yet of Boost Mobile, but a couple of the big ones anyway are providing information to the NSA. Now, they're very quick to point out that the actual content of the conversations is, at least so far, apparently not being recorded, but who's being called, the duration of calls, and things of that nature are being, that information is being transmitted to the NSA.
You know, they're so proud, and President Obama talking today, guys, about how proud he is that they don't listen in on the calls. But because of PRISM and Blarney, which are the internet programs that they spy in on, what difference does it make? They can look in on your emails. They can go to every website you've ever been on. They can literally see your emails as you're typing them, even if you don't send them. Oh, wow. You didn't listen in on my calls. Are you not merciful? Right? I suspect that people would be a lot more concerned about the websites they're going to more than the conversation they're having with their uncle.
Yeah.
But, you know, so it's
a small consolation, I guess.
Yeah, not much of a silver lining there.
Yeah. So the one area that we have very little information on, unfortunately, is we do have constant references to credit card transactions being cataloged and being given to the NSA, but we don't yet know which banks or which credit card companies are actually doing that gathering and the transmitting of the information. I expect that eventually that will come out, but we don't currently know.
So now the scope of the program is we've got Verizon, AT&T, Sprint, et cetera. So that over 300 million Americans in just those companies, right? Then we've got Microsoft, Google, Yahoo, AOL,
Skype,
and
Paltalk.
The only major website it appears that is not being monitored, well, actually two of them, Twitter and the YoungTurks.com.
And InfoWars, conceivably.
Oh, can you imagine? Okay, but
Just hands it over.
Yeah, that might be some issues. So, and then on top of that, you've got your credit card. So what, did we leave anything out? Okay, now, this is for, as I said, over 300 million Americans that are affected at least. Now, on PRISM, they claim, well, look, we're not looking into U.S., we're looking outside the U.S., so we're monitoring all those emails and websites, et cetera, for foreigners, but not necessarily for, I don't believe them for a second. Of course, it's exactly what they said.
Well, they have a quote actually on that. So James Clapper, the director of national intelligence, says that the NSA did not wittingly collect any type of data pertaining to millions of Americans. So I love the out he leaves himself there, that unwittingly, they might very well have done that.
I don't know that I ever heard wittingly used in a sentence.
No, I haven't. I didn't know it existed.
So here's what more from the Washington Post story on that. This is how they break it down. Analysts who use the system from a web portal at Fort Meade, Maryland, key in selectors, right, or search terms that are designed to produce at least 51% confidence in a target's foreignness. So they, based on
they
all
talk
the
about
sort of
falafel
selectors that they look at here, they find out if you're 51% confident that you're foreign. As the Washington Post points out, and this is a direct quote from the paper, it's not a very stringent test. Right.
Yeah.
So
for example, if you happen to have a name like Cenk Uygur, are you going to cross a 51% threshold on name alone?
Easy. You cruise in. So then the training materials obtained by the Washington Post instruct new analysts to make quarterly reports of any accidental collection of U.S. content, but add that it's nothing to worry about.
It's nothing to worry about.
Well,
forgive me for worrying. And by the way, the person who broke the original Verizon story works for The Guardian, which is a British paper, and he lives in Brazil. His name is Glenn Greenwald. That is outside the United States, so they can look into every single thing he's ever done online and go, oops, sorry.
51%. I love that, like, whether
it's not even 51%. No, they do target him. He's outside the United States.
Yeah.
He's foreign.
Even though he's a U.S. citizen.
Yeah. No, but it's awesome that apparently, like, we have the Constitution, which you're going to get to, but, like, apparently now the government spying on you can come down to whether or not you call it soccer or football. that can trigger the search right there.
Yeah, make sure you spell football with 2 O's.
And not a U, otherwise
don't make that mistake.
It'll be 51% for it.
When they make the mistake, they gather it up in a quarterly report. First of all, this has been going on so long that they already have quarterly reports.
Yeah. And so this is fascinating because, number one, we're collecting trillions of whatever unit we use of data, right? And this is now beginning to, people are starting to call this big data, right? And then we collect it on foreigners when it comes to the internet. We collect it on Americans when it comes to phone lines. And we unwittingly collect a ton of it online for Americans as well if we think they're 51% foreign, et cetera, et cetera. Now I'm going to read to you the Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution. And let's see if this appears constitutional or perhaps unconstitutional. Let's make a judgment together. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Now, they violate at least 4 parts of the Fourth Amendment there, but the one I really want to focus on is the very end. Particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. When you search 300 million Americans, it doesn't appear that you're describing a person or place you'd like to search or seize.
Now, I'll legitimately play devil's advocate, because of course there is a counter argument to that, one which I don't really agree with, but nonetheless there are other parts of the Constitution about protecting the lives and well-being of American citizens that are going to enter into conflict with that. And they would also say, we're just gathering this data, we're not looking at it. We're not, we don't have people yet digging in and actually searching.
We just gathered it for our health. It's just sitting there.
I got it, but you can't, your argument has got to at some point be more than just laughing at that, because I don't think I don't think they're looking through my emails. I don't think they care. The question is, if you're not engaged in the kind of activity that they're looking for, do we really have anything to worry about? Because ultimately what we're worried about is when you communicate with your mistress, when you communicate on a website that would embarrass you, when you're trying to...
Unpopular political opinions, and then you run for Congress someday.
Sure, right. Is that...
So let me address that in a couple of ways. The Fourth Amendment explains how the rest of the Constitution is constrained. So yeah, of course they're supposed to protect our life, liberty, etc., right? But they're supposed to do it within these constraints. And so you don't get to say, well, I had to protect your life and liberty, so I ignore the rest of the Constitution.
Right.
So that's gone. Right?
I don't think it's gone, because we have as technology has changed, obviously they didn't know about computers. We can presume that when we talk about papers, that applies to the things that you're looking at on your computer, whether on the internet or not. But also what's changed also is the ability to attack, the ability to strike uses this kind of technology also.
It's been a lot of hacking lately in the news.
So but the need for the government to protect on a broader scale has also changed. The ability of enemies of the state, legitimate or not. Well, let's talk about only the legitimate ones.
Okay, so I find that argument incredibly unpersuasive. And so I would say to the government official who says that, great, then put together an amendment to amend the Constitution, and we'll have a conversation about that. Well, we are on Money and Politics. You show me your amendment. Until then, this Fourth Amendment is enormously clear. Enormously clear. It says we're not going to go into your papers and effects, etc., unless we're targeting a specific person and we have a warrant on that person. You can't do a warrant as the FISA court did on 300 million people. But what have they not read the Fourth Amendment? That's crazy.
What if you unwittingly do it, though?
Oh, I see. And so there's two different aspects here to address what Ben's saying, and they're interesting points. So one, the minute you're gathering our records as to who we called, how long we called them for, etc., you're already, in essence, looking at that. You don't have to look at the phone call. That gathering of information is already unconstitutional. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. But what I'm curious about is, of course, that this is not, the Fourth Amendment is not, well, it may be news to many of the members of Congress who passed the law that makes this legal, right? It may be unconstitutional, but it's legal. Nobody broke a law here, although I suspect there were probably some laws broken. But so I have little confidence. Certainly, I don't have any confidence there are 5 members of the Supreme Court that are going to say that this violates the Fourth Amendment. The question is, are we even at a lower court? Or suppose they change it and they're like, okay, all federal judges get 1 vote. And it's going to be, the 450 federal judges, or however many there are in the country, are going to determine this is constitutional. I sort of don't sense that that's going to win.
So, well, okay, that's an interesting question. So this is an important part of the process, because so sometimes people say, well, look, it's legal, and President Obama's saying that all day today. I passed it. Congress knows about it, and they're okay with it. And I went through 1 court, the FISA court, and they were okay with it. All 3 branches of government agree. And so sometimes people get confused. But the reality is Congress passes and the president signs many laws that later the Supreme Court rules are unconstitutional. They passed, but they shouldn't have passed because they're unconstitutional, right? So ultimately, the arbiter of whether this is unconstitutional will have to be the Supreme Court if it ever gets there. And now the ACLU, and among others, is saying, well, now that we know that we are, if you're a Verizon customer, et cetera, they're tracking you, then you have standing and you can go to court and say, I am the person who's suing because I'm the person being tracked, which you couldn't have done before.
Right, because we knew this was going on. That's why this was the least revelatory big news scoop that I can remember. I'm like, yeah, okay, obviously they've been doing it. I was 100%.
But we knew it. We knew it. I don't think the guy in Kansas knew it. I think if you told the guy in Kansas, hey, you know that they're tracking all your phone calls,
I disagree.
He would be like, it's a crazy conspiracy theorist.
I disagree completely. I really do, and I think that movies have a large thing to do with that, is that we've seen it in television and movies since the moment 24 came on the air, and and there's something about, as you watched, how easily they were able to hone in on information, and obviously some of that is unrealistic, but it had a feel of like, you just sense, this doesn't feel like this is not so far out of bounds of what we know they're capable of.
All right, well, let me reframe it this way, because I understand what you're saying about popular culture. If a week ago you had said on CNN, I bet the government is tracking every single phone call in the country, they would have laughed you out of the studio. You wouldn't have been able to come back on CNN. Say, oh, that's crazy. No, you don't know that. That sounds crazy. That's conspiratorial.
A little, but you're framing the argument a little bit with the use of the word tracking. Like, again, if you'd said...
But they are tracking. They're literally tracking.
Well, I mean... Storing.
Like that they're gathering, that they have data, could the NSA know instantly every phone call I've made over the last 6 years, how long it was, and to who it was, and to whom it was? I would say, yeah, I think they could.
Yeah.
So, if that's tracking, okay.
I'm going to call that tracking.
Okay.
So one last thing to answer Ben's question, which is which way the Supreme Court will go. I believe they will rule it unconstitutional.
It's possible. Literally, as I said the words, I don't think they will, I thought, okay, I still don't think they will, but they might. They might.
So Scalia surprised people earlier in the week by saying that the DNA testing that they do on people who have been arrested is unconstitutional because that violates the Fourth Amendment. If he thinks the DNA testing on a guy who's already been arrested is unconstitutional, wait till he gets a load of this. And as I read the text of it there, I thought it's the most unconstitutional thing I've ever seen. It violates literally 4 different parts of a very short amendment. And so I think that there's some chance that some of the conservatives might even look at that and go, yeah, I don't think we should be doing that.
It's entirely possible, as I'm now backtracking completely, because you know full well, that as we hear from Bill O'Reilly later in the show, plenty of conservatives are reacting to it aggressively.
You know who might shock the world and rule this unconstitutional? Clarence Thomas.
Anybody who's genuinely obsessed with a concern about big, broad government.
And I'll tell you why.
Yeah,
you think Clarence Thomas hasn't been on the wrong kind of websites? You remember his confirmation hearings?
Totally.
You think that he wants the government knowing what websites he's been on, wittingly or unwittingly? My guess is Clarence Thomas declares it unconstitutional.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll see. But on its face, and then we had the conversation here, devil's advocate, etc. You can make your own call, but read it again and again. To me, it seems obviously massively unconstitutional.